Oops. Whoa. There we go. Okay. So what was happening, if you had a stash of cocaine, it would only last for 15 to 20 minutes. After the 15 to 20 minutes, you start coming down, you start getting depressed. So all of a sudden, you need to use it again. So what they tended to do was, if they had a select amount of stash, they used the whole thing. They would binge smoke, they would binge use it, and they would use up the whole thing. It really became kind of interesting because there were a lot of individuals that, the drug community is kind of an interesting community. A lot of people share their drugs with other people. But suddenly with crack cocaine and with crystal meth, people didn't share anymore. So there was less of a community. You know, you got marijuana and everybody sits around and smokes pot. Isn't that what we learned on the 70s show? Everybody sits around and smokes pot? That's what happened on the 70s show anyway. If that had been crack, or if that had been crystal meth, they wouldn't have shared it with anybody. They'd use it themselves. They're very stingy as far as their drugs are concerned. They're very stingy to the extent that they won't take care of their children, their own children. And this is really a tragedy. Crack gives a rush that only lasts a few seconds, and euphoria and excitation that only lasts a few minutes, 5 to 20 minutes. As soon as the effect dissipates, the individual feels irritable, they feel dysphoric, they feel uneasy, and they feel anxious to the point of paranoia. For this reason, crack is almost always smoked in a binge pattern. And most of it is because there's the paranoia. You're afraid that somebody's going to catch you, but you get all these really negative feelings if you're not using. So you keep using until you don't have any more, because you don't like that feeling of anxiousness, that feeling of irritability, that feeling of dysphoria. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how do they smoke crack? Do they start smoking
Crack.
Crack pipe?
Yeah. It's a really short pipe. Yeah. They're trying not to lose anything. So it's a really short pipe. And it's like long. So the problem, you get what you call crack thumb from lighting the pipe. Remember, it has to go up to 195 degrees in order for it to become a gas. And you're sucking the whole time because you don't want to lose it yet, okay? So they burn their fingers, they wear a callus on their thumb from flipping the pick lighter. I know, it's so cool. Yeah, we're going to talk about that right now. Okay. Now remember, the pipe's really short, okay? So it's right here in your face. Clicking like this. So there's a lot of really interesting things that happen. Crack has some fairly unpleasant side effects. It makes you thirsty. It gives you a really bad cough. It gives you tremors where you can't control yourself. It's like you've got Parkinson's disease. It dries out your skin. That's odd. It's mainly because you're not taking in enough moisture. It makes you have slurred speech. It blurs your vision, which is not, you don't want to drive after you've been smoking crack. You get crack keratitis, abrasion of the eye, and it's mainly from this. You got that short pipe, you're trying to light the thing, you got crack thumb, and the flint flips up into your eye, or the fire gets into your eye, or the gas escapes and gets into your eye, and it causes all kinds of interesting eye problems. Cracked thumb or hands, burns on the hand and callus on the thumb from lighting a crack pipe, and this thing is really, really short. Remember, crack burns, facial burns from lighting the pipe, of course. Remember, it's only this long, so the probability is, okay, this is what people do. I know this sounds stupid. You know, you can adjust the flame on your light, right? Okay, so they're trying to cook this thing, and the bigger the flame, the faster it cooks. So what they try to do is they try to make the flame just big enough so that it heats up your lips. but doesn't burn your lips, okay? But sometimes, of course, if they're moving the pipe, and of course they've got the trimmers anyway, and, you know, all this stuff is taking place, and they got this really big flame trying to cook the stuff, and they're burning their lips, they're burning their nose, the ends of their noses, they're getting, you know, blisters on their cheeks, really ugly stuff. But of course they don't feel it because this is an anesthetic, so they don't feel it till afterwards. And of course then they come down, and now all of these problems that they have become exacerbated because of the use of the crack. Psychological side effects of smoking crack, paranoia, of course, as I said before, craving for the drug, asocial behavior. Remember, all the other drug movements that we had in the United States, especially the marijuana movement in the 1960s and 1970s, that brought everybody together. All you had to do was watch Breakfast Club, and you know that marijuana brings you together. People share their pot with everybody else because everybody's brought together. Crack is the opposite. It drives people away because you're not going to share your crack with anybody. As soon as you stop using crack, it makes you depressed. So you want to stay away from that depression as much as you possibly can. And you're also paranoid. Everybody to you is a narc. Because if they turn you in, if they get busted and they know that you're using, they can turn you in and they don't have to go to jail, but you'll get to go to jail. So you become extremely paranoid. You don't want anybody to know. You use all your own stuff. So you have this interesting, whereas pot brings everybody together and you have this whole community of pot smokers, there's no such thing as crack smokers, a community of crack smokers. They have crack houses where you go, you buy your stuff, and you smoke your crack right there. But these people have nothing to do with one another. As a matter of fact, crack houses usually put people in different bedrooms, trying to keep them apart, because they don't trust each other. So there is this the paranoia leads to asocial behavior. Attention problems, of course, irritability. You have drug dreams, where you dream that you're just coming down off of things. You're just coming down off of your high, and of course that irritates you, and it's a nightmare. Hyperexcitability. Remember the guy that was on the crack and he was trying to stand still and he couldn't, and he's just moving all over the place. He's crack dancing all over the place. Visual and auditory hallucinations, very prevalent. Depression, of course, as I said before. Cocaine psychosis is a possibility, just like meth psychosis. High-risk sexual behavior, and that's the high-risk sexual behavior. And we keep talking about this, that people do things for their drugs. One of the easiest ways to get money is to sell your body. This is both male and female. So you'll have male prostitutes and female prostitutes. Crack whores, as we say. These ladies will do anything for their next fix, and literally they will. Now the sad thing is that if we've got a couple and both of them are users, the husband will sell the wife so that they can have more drugs. It's just one of the sad things. This whole high-risk sexual behavior, and they'll have sex with anybody for money, and any way the person wants them to have sex. I think I told you the story, or maybe I didn't tell you the story. This is an ugly story. There was a lady that had 2 kids, and whoever her old man was long gone. He wasn't around anymore. So she got a stash of crack. Was it crystal meth or was it crack? No, I think it was crystal meth. She got a stash of crystal meth. And so the best way, so she decided that she was going to have a house party, a weekend party, everybody comes over. She had 2 kids. Remember, she had 2 kids. One of them was 18 months old, the other one was 3 years old. And so she invites all these people to come over to her place. And she runs out of stuff. She's using her house as a crack house. And eventually she sells her children to somebody. I know. And I'd like to say she sold them so that they could take them and take care of them, but that's not what she sold them for. She sold them for sex, unfortunately. Not only that, but this weekend party that was supposed to last for 2 days actually lasted for 5 days. And in those 5 days, one of the things about crack, one of the things about crystal meth is you're not hungry, so you don't eat. So there was no food in the house. There was booze, but there was no food. And when her relatives came in after 5 days, they hadn't heard anything for 5 days. They'd heard about the party, and they were worried about the kids, but of course they didn't go over there until after the party was over with. They found the kids drinking beer. The 18-month-old, that's the only food in the house. They were drinking beer. So of course, social services came in, they took the kids away from the lady, they gave them to the grandparents, and guess what the grandparents did? They gave them back, of course, because that wasn't really her. That wasn't normal for her. And so they gave them back until the next party. And then they took them away from the grandparents. It was really a tragedy. Really a serious tragedy. People are more interested in a good time than they are about taking care of their children. Respiratory side effects from smoking crack: chest pains, pneumonia, coughs, crack lung, decreased ability to diffuse CO2, hemorrhaging. Remember, one of the things that happens with cocaine when you snort it up into your nose, you get that vasoconstriction. A lot of times it makes those blood vessels brittle. So when they expand again, all of a sudden now you've got a hemorrhage. And this is one of the things we see a lot with individuals that snort a lot of cocaine. Not only does their cartilage in their nose die, but also they get these amazing hemorrhages, amazing bloody noses that they can't stop. So what they have to do is come into the emergency room, and of course we cauterize that blood vessel. And if you cauterize, what you do is you take an electrical electrode, and you seal that blood vessel so that it won't hemorrhage anymore. That's the only way you can stop the bleeding. So you have to go in there and kill the blood vessel. Eventually, of course, with all these hemorrhages, the cartilage aren't getting enough blood, so the cartilage dies, and then you have to have reconstructive surgery on your nose. Cartilage is not bone. It's like pre-bone. So you can actually transplant cartilage from a different part of your body, and that's usually how they reconstruct the bone. They put new cartilage in there. But of course, then they tell you, we know that you've been snorting cocaine, and that's why your cartilage died. And of course, nobody admits it because that's against the law, so they don't admit it. And of course, they go back to snorting cocaine, and then their cartilage dies again, and suddenly we have to reconstruct their nose again. Respiratory failure is a possibility. Death due to anesthetization of the respiratory center in the medulla, and that is why these people die. That's why we see them overdosing themselves to death. Crack or freebase can be mixed with marijuana to create caviar. I know, all these great names. Caviar, champagne, Grimmies, they call them Grimmies. Fry Daddies, which is always fun. Cocoa Puffs, Hubba, and Woolies. There you go. So if anybody offers you Cocoa Puffs, make sure it's in a box and that it's chocolate, okay? Otherwise, they're talking about cocaine, not Cocoa Puffs. Cocoa Puffs. Users may combine crack with PCP or ketamine to make space basing, quack, or tragic magic. These two are very dangerous drugs. So if you mix the crack with either of these drugs, this is a really amazing high. And these individuals feel no pain. And they have this wonderful extended high. Mixing crack with tar heroin creates speedballs, hot rocks, or Belushi rocks. Why Belushi? Because Jim Belushi, this is how he overdosed. His girlfriend shot him up with they were speedballing. They mixed cocaine with heroin. When crack or cocaine is mixed with wine, it is called crack coolers, as cool as that is. 2004, 4,500 deaths occurred from the direct or indirect effects of cocaine. Cocaine overdose doesn't always kill, but results in tachycardia and hyperventilation, accompanied by feelings of impending death. Death usually results from cardiac arrest, seizures, stroke, respiratory failure, or hyperthermia. Social consequences, because using crack can lead to risky sexual behavior, children are sometimes produced in circumstances that are not optimum. In other words, they get pregnant. They get pregnant because they're having sex. They know that they shouldn't have sex, but they need their crack, so they go ahead and have sex anyway, and then they get pregnant. Crack smokers have social problems, and they don't relate to other of their own offspring any better. In other words, if they have children, they don't get along with them. Remember, asocialness is a side effect of using this stuff. So if they're not very social anyway, what's the probability they're going to be able to interrelate with their children? Crack smokers show high rates of neglect, abandonment, and abuse of their children. There are high rates of single and no-parent families. Women willing to trade sex for crack are very common, and then it starts all over again, of course, because then they get pregnant again. They shouldn't get pregnant, but they do. Remember, well, you guys weren't in the class last year. Kevin Cody from Pinyon came in, and he was saying that the biggest problem that they had in Pinyon at the time, this is before they made the big bust, where the feds came in and arrested all those people and sent them to prison, stopped the meth trade in that area. He was saying that the biggest problem they had was that women were selling their children for meth. They were selling them for sex, but then they were just selling them to people. And the people, of course, that they were selling them to were the people that had the methamphetamine. These aren't the nicest people in the world. What are they going to use those children for? And the answer is sex. Why there are pedophiles out there. I don't understand pedophilia. Nobody understands pedophilia except a pedophile. Why are they attracted to children? But they were doing that in Pinyon. So we're not just talking about New York City and Chicago and Phoenix and Los Angeles. We're talking about here on the reservation. This stuff has happened here on the reservation. We've had this problem here. And this is what happens to you. You lose your ability or your desire to take care of your own children. And your children become a commodity to you. And you're willing to get rid of them, to sell them, in order for the next fix. The physical and mental effects of cocaine and amphetamines are similar. Cocaine is about twice as expensive as amphetamines. Cocaine gives a higher rush and more intense high than amphetamines do, but amphetamines allow for more prolonged energy. Amphetamines last for 6 to 9 times longer. Remember, cocaine lasts for 5 to 20 minutes, so amphetamines can last for hours. For that reason, people like amphetamines. Amphetamines are more likely to cause addiction than cocaine is. Cocaine metabolizes much faster, and for that reason, it's not as addictive as amphetamines are. Amphetamines are synthetic stimulants that provide similar effects as cocaine, but cheaper and more prolonged effects. Amphetamines are called uppers, speed, crack, crystal, ice, shabu, and glass. And while I told you the story of my wife pushing speed when she was working at a truck stop. She was working as a waitress at a truck stop, and she was pushing speed, and she got caught by the cops. The cops tried to get her to turn on her supplier, and that's when she bolted out from Indiana and came down to Texas. She loved me. That's why she came back. That's what she said anyway. And this is how stupid I am, okay? I took her back. She was just using me. And it didn't take very long for her to leave again. But I'm dumb as dirt. I think with not my head. I think with another part of my anatomy, unfortunately. And I let her come back, and she stung me again. And she was able to keep from being arrested, sadly enough. Amphetamines are snorted. You can snort amphetamines just like you can snort cocaine. Amphetamines are injected. This is the normal way that we get amphetamines into our system. You can take them as a pill. Of course, this takes a little bit longer to get into your system. Worldwide, 33 million people used amphetamines and methamphetamines in 2003. These are old statistics. We're not getting very good statistics now because, the federal government did something. The federal government did something. It was because of the gun regulations. They wanted the gun lobby didn't want us tracking gun registrations anymore. They didn't want us talking about how many guns were out there. They didn't want us to talk about ammunition. They didn't want us to talk about what kind of guns were being bought. So they stopped all of this stuff. So we're not getting very good statistics about drugs anymore because everything was connected. If it had anything to do with guns, they weren't allowed to write it down. So now we're not getting very good statistics on what kind of drugs we have in the United States and how many people are using any of these drugs. Speed used to come in several forms. It came in the form of amphetamines, cross tops, white crosses, and cartwheels. My wife had white crosses. She had a whole bag full of white crosses. According to her, it was $10,000 worth of, which is more money than I made in a whole year. I was an E5, and I didn't make $10,000 in a year. And here she had a whole bag full of white crosses. And of course, what did I do with them? I threw them away, of course, because I could have gotten into trouble. Biphetamine, black beauties, dexedrine, dexies or beans, benzedrine, bennies, and methadrine are the other types of amphetamines. These are all synthetic uppers. Amphetamines were first synthesized in 1887. It was used by both sides during World War II. The Japanese used it, the Germans used it, and the Americans used it. The Germans were the ones that came up with a way of manufacturing this stuff right behind the enemy line, right behind the lines. And this is known as the Nazi method. But they weren't making amphetamines, they were making methamphetamines. It was used as a diet pill in the 1950s and 1960s. The hippies fueled their psychedelic experience with street speed, marijuana, and LSD. We think of the psychedelic movement as mostly LSD and marijuana, but the reality was that these individuals were actually using speed. So if we look at the hippies of the 1960s and 1970s, if you look at how thin they are, the reason they're so skinny is because, one, they're not eating very nutritiously, but the other reason is because they're on speed. And so, despite the fact they're smoking marijuana and getting the munchies, they're not really eating very well. And they're taking the speed, and of course, they're able to stay up for days, and they were using it as an aphrodisiac, and all kinds of strange things were happening. Amphetamines became a Schedule II drug in 1970. One of the reasons that they made it a Schedule II drug was because they wanted to start arresting these anti-war agitators on the street. Who was president in 1970? Carter? No. Carter was 76.
Reagan?
Reagan was 80.
Nixon?
Nixon. It was Richard Nixon. Talk about a paranoid son of a bitch. He was one paranoid fella, and he thought that he could stop all of this demonstrating by arresting all these kids. Well, you couldn't arrest them for demonstrating. That's not against the law. So he decided that he was going to start arresting them for the drugs that they were using. And of course, marijuana was already illegal. It was easy to hide marijuana. It's easy to get rid of marijuana. So he decided he was going to arrest these kids for amphetamine usage. So he made it a Schedule II drug and started arresting whole groups of people, just masses. There would be a demonstration, and the cops would go in there, and they would pick them up. They'd take them to the police station, and they would search them if they had any amphetamines on them. They threw them in jail for a year and a half. I know it worked. It really messed up the peace movement. And this was in 1970. Schedule II drugs. Street chemists began producing crank, methamphetamine sulfate, and crystal methamphetamine hydrochloride in the 80s and 90s. These chemists were able to convert the active chemicals in cold medications, phenylpropanolamine, this drug right here, and ephedrine and pseudoephedrine into crank and crystal. It's ephedrine and pseudoephedrine that are really the substances that they were creating the methamphetamines. In the 1990s, a new stronger methamphetamine began to be produced called ice, glass, batu, or shabu, dextroisomer methamphetamines. This form later came to be known as crystal meth. So crystal meth is a lot stronger than methamphetamines. They also called it Tina, peanut butter, deadhead, chalk, tweak, yellow rock, glass, or rose quartz speed. These are some of the words that we use now for meth heads. I call them meth heads all the time, but tweaking means that you're using methamphetamines. I refer to them as deadheads all the time. This stuff is really strong, and for this reason, now remember, methamphetamines destroy brain cells. We already know that. Everybody knows that, and nobody cares. They're still using it. But the methamphetamine they had before wasn't nearly as strong as this crystal meth. And the crystal meth makes you even stupider, makes you dumb. Remember, it takes 18 months to recover from meth head. The day after you stop using, you can, it's 18 months later that you will gain back your intellectual capacity. And that's why this drug is referred to as deadhead. This is what we used to call the kids in when I was working in the emergency room. They'd come in tweaking, and of course we would refer to them as deadheads. We didn't know whether it was crystal meth or methamphetamine. We didn't really know what kind that they had been using, but if they were especially out of it, then we referred to them as deadheads. The profile of the typical methamphetamine user is a white male between 19 and 40 years old. In the West, and especially Hawaii, an equal number of women have used the drugs as men. Congratulations, that's equality. So I think that's wonderful that women are equal to men. As far as drug use is concerned, meth is particularly rampant in the gay community, where it is the third most popular drug after alcohol and marijuana. So it's very common in the gay community. Now, why in the world would it be so popular in the gay community? Why is it so prevalent in the gay community? Why do they have meth parties? Remember, it's used as an aphrodisiac. And that's it. That's it. It makes people impervious to the pain that is happening to them in whatever their sexual relations are. They're completely impervious. Amphetamines can be cooked in laboratory facilities. Initially, biker gangs cooked the drugs, especially Hell's Angels and the Gypsy Jokers. The Gypsy Jokers are no longer intact. This group was destroyed by the Hell's Angels. Biker wars are not pretty. A lot of dead bodies, a lot of mutilated bodies, really ugly. Gypsy Jokers don't exist anymore, but the Hell's Angels still do. Of course, these guys are in their 60s and 70s. The ones that survived. The ones that survived are the ones that didn't use their own product. But the Hells Angels are still out there pushing this stuff. Recently, Mexican gangs have taken over the manufacture of this stuff, and it's ugly. It's really, really ugly. Because these people, when they're on this stuff, they can become extremely violent. And they do horrible, horrible things. They decapitate people. They mutilate people. They will spray an area with automatic fire and kill anybody that happens to be standing up. And this is the drug wars that we have seen directly across the border from the United States. This is what Trump wants us to think about. He wants us to think about all these ugly, bloody drug wars that are taking place. Most of the people being killed, of course, are fellow Mexicans. They're Mexicans killing other Mexicans. The DEA establishes or estimates that there are over 300 ways to manufacture methamphetamine from pseudoephedrine, and for this reason, cold medicine has been controlled and put behind the counter. So you cannot go and just buy cold medicine. In the old days, of course, they had a whole rack of cold medicines, but kids started stealing this stuff to make crystal meth. So they put it behind the counter now. So in order to get a cold medicine, you have to ask the pharmacist. Snorting methamphetamine is more toxic to the nasal mucosa than snorting cocaine and may cause irritation and pain. The most intense high comes from injecting amphetamines directly into the bloodstream. This causes sclerosis and pain, often resulting from the injection. So it not only hurts, but it also hardens the arteries, hardens your blood vessels. Methamphetamine is extremely bitter and takes much longer to get the effect to the brain. Amphetamines last 4 to 6 hours as compared to 10 to 90 minutes for cocaine. So people want the amphetamines, but they don't get as good a high. The high from cocaine is much stronger. So you have to use more of the crystal meth. This is great stuff. Amphetamines force the increase of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine because it forces the release of these neurotransmitters from terminal vesicles. It reverses the reabsorption pumps, forcing more neurotransmitter into the synapse. Enzymes that metabolize the neurotransmitters are blocked by the amphetamines. And so one of the things that happens is it pushes you into a state of it can potentially push you into a state of psychosis if you take too much. Too much of these 3 neurotransmitters will make you psychotic. Remember, it's dopamine that makes people schizophrenic. Too much dopamine receptor sites makes them schizophrenic. So we're increasing the amount of norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine into the system. Remember, epinephrine is the substance that makes you super strong, that makes you able to do things that you didn't think you could do. And dopamine makes you feel good. Prolonged use of amphetamines reduces the body's ability to produce the affected neurotransmitters. Okay, so what has happened here? We've got epinephrine, we've got norepinephrine, we've got dopamine. Now, if you use it for too long a period of time, all of a sudden you're not manufacturing this stuff yourself. It's kind of like steroids. If you take anabolic steroids, then your testes don't have to produce as much testosterone because you've got a superficial amount floating through your body. So your testes stop producing testosterone, and not as much testosterone. So what happens to you? Well, your junk shrinks. Do you know what junk is? Your testicles shrink, your penis shrinks. Why? Because you're not producing your own testosterone. This is all superficial testosterone. That's what happens. Exactly the same thing is taking place with amphetamines, but except with dopamine, the stuff that makes you feel good, epinephrine that gives you energy, and norepinephrine that makes you feel confident. So if you use this stuff too long, all of a sudden your body can't produce the neurotransmitter that makes you feel confident anymore. It's not producing nearly as much. You don't have nearly as much energy, so you're lethargic. And you can't feel happy because the dopamine makes you feel happy. So all of a sudden that's all gone. Now you have created a toxic environment in your brain where you have to use this stuff just to get any kind of normal feelings. We all feel happy, we all feel energized, we have confidence in ourselves all the time. These individuals can't do that unless they shoot up with the meth, if they get a toxic level in their system. Research shows that norepinephrine reduction as long as 6 months after drug use has ceased. Research also, 6 months. So that means for 6 months, you're not going to feel confident. You can't feel confident. You don't have that neurotransmitter in your body, and that's going to last for 6 months. Research also shows a 24% reduction of dopamine resulting in difficulty feeling pleasure. That's anhedonia. Thus, after heavy use for the individual to feel normal, they have to use the drug. Methamphetamines also causes a degeneration of the serotonin-producing cells, and now you don't have that way of feeling good either. Research of methamphetamine users found that they had 11.3% reduction in the gray matter of their hippocampus, their cingulate gyrus, and their paralimbic cortices. These areas affect your craving, your mood, your emotions, and your memory. So now you're stupid, and now you got meth head. However, brains on methamphetamines are actually larger due to swelling. So it's a toxic amount, and you're actually making your brain fill up with fluid. And the reason is it's trying to protect itself. You're putting a toxic amount of this stuff in your system. It's like hitting your arm over and over and over again. It's going to swell up. That's exactly what you're doing with your brain. It's like you're hitting it with little hammers, and you're forcing it to fill up with fluid. As ugly as that all that is. So why do people use it? I mean, this is all horrible sounding. I mean, you're destroying your brain. You can't feel happy anymore. So why are they still using it? Why do you use it? Why would you use this stuff if it's causing all of these problems? As Americans, a lot of what we do has to do with money. But this doesn't have anything to do with money. As Americans, we like to feel good. And this is a superficial form of feeling good. And that's why they do it. And that's why they use more and more and more and more, to the point of poisoning themselves, to the point of their brains swelling because of the edema, because of the fluid in their brains. Amphetamine causes increased energy, increased heart rate, raised blood temperature, rapid respiration, high blood pressure, dilation of bronchial vessels, appetite suppression. So whereas before marijuana makes you hungry, this stuff makes you not hungry. You're satiated. You don't even think about eating. Binging on amphetamines can result in not sleeping for 3 to 10 days. It's already causing a psychotic structure in your brain because it's not allowing any of these chemicals to dissipate, any of these neurotransmitters to dissipate. But if you stay up for 3 to 10 days, you don't get any REM sleep, it kicks you into psychosis as well. Tolerance of amphetamine is fairly rapid and extreme. A normal dosage is 15 to 30 milligrams. Long-term users may use as much as 5,000 milligrams a day. So 15 to 30, now they're using 5,000 milligrams a day because of the tolerance level. Effects on these individuals: sleep deprivation, of course, heart toxicity. So if you're a methamphetamine user, you can expect to die young. Why? Because you have really damaged your heart, the blood vessels in your heart. Blood vessel toxicity, severe malnutrition, of course, is another problem. Overdose may result in convulsions, hyperthermia, cardiovascular collapse, which is, then they come into the emergency room, and guess who gets to take care of them? And we're trying to bring them back. And we got no idea why all of this stuff is taking place. So guess when they recover? They come in high. And they're going to stay high until their body metabolizes all that stuff. So it's going to look like a heart attack. And we're going to treat them, and we're going to do all we can to keep them alive. And everything we do doesn't slow down their heart rate. It doesn't make their heart beat more regularly. It doesn't lower their temperature. We put ice on them. We bathe them in alcohol, and their temperature doesn't come down. And there's nothing we can do. But they stay alive. And as soon as their body metabolizes the crystal meth, everything goes back to normal. I know. We did everything we could to keep this person alive, and nothing worked. and then all of a sudden now they're lonely. Everything's fine. Did we save their life? No. Well, maybe yeah, we probably did. We probably saved their lives. Half the time they're vomiting, which is always fun. And they're vomiting the most noxious stuff you can possibly imagine.
And it's simply a choice.
I know. It's so much fun. Oh, so you're hoping, oh my God, I hope somebody else gets that room. I hope I don't have to go into that room. I hope I don't have to try to take care of that person. Because I'm going to be fighting with that person for hours, trying to keep them alive. And then as soon as it metabolizes, and it's just constant. I mean, they're vomiting, you're washing them down with alcohol, you're trying to bring their make their heart rate regular, and there's nothing that you can do that actually helps, that actually reduces their symptoms until they metabolize the methamphetamine.
And then once they release, it's like you're evolving to it.
Exactly. They're going to go back out and they're going to do it again because now they're feeling depressed. And the other problem is that they blame you for slowing down or dissipating their high. Their high wasn't nearly as much. Maybe something that you did actually accelerated the metabolism. So whereas they were going to get 3 hours of good feelings, all of a sudden they only got 2. So whose fault is that? So they're pissed off at you when they leave the hospital. And they will call you all kinds of interesting names because you're the one that messed them up. And they will threaten to sue you because it took you so long to fix them. They're going to sue you. Yeah, like a meth head's going to sue anybody. Unlike most drugs, amphetamines are abused as much or more by women than men. This may lead to use during pregnancy, which results in irritable baby syndrome, intolerance to light and touch, tremors, muscle coordination problems, abnormal reflexes, sucking and swallowing problems. These kids cannot eat, and disturbed sleeping, of course, and then they cry like cats. They sound like cats. Other problems that might occur for the baby born to a methamphetamine user is premature delivery, congenital deformities such as clubfoot or limb abnormalities, gastric problems, intestines protruding from the stomach, placental separation and hemorrhage being potentially lethal to both mother and baby, intrauterine brain hemorrhage and stroke, HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C, of course. These are all problems. One of the things that we saw, and a lot of times these babies don't survive. The reality is, a lot of times they don't make it. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, because they're a mess. I've had babies with their hearts born outside their bodies, with their intestines protruding from their abdomens. We had a baby that, now she's gone, I can say this, we had a baby that was born with no skull. What do you do with a baby with no skull? Yes, that's tough. Yeah, good dying. And maybe that was a good thing, because, what are we going to do? We're going to give it a structure? No. So everything was there. All the organs were there. Anyway, it's tough. It's really tough. And you never know what's going to be missing. That's the problem. There's a lot of bone abnormalities, so there's a lot of limb problems. But there's also no skull. It's really ugly stuff. Really, really ugly. And unfortunately, of course, I was working at Children's Hospital right in the apex of the cocaine epidemic in the United States. If the baby survives gestation, they may have developmental problems, growth and developmental delays, learning disabilities, increased incidence of ADHD, increased risk for rage disorder. Here's the funny thing about their ADHD. Okay, so they were born a crack baby or a cocaine baby, and they have ADHD now. Guess what we can't do to treat these kids? We can't give them amphetamines. That's the normal treatment for ADHD. And of course, if the doctor doesn't understand that this is a crack baby,
he's going to give them amphetamines, and it whacks them out. It just whacks them before they go.
Describe gestation.
Gestation is the 9 months that you spend in the womb. The Latin term for gestation is gravida. So if you ever hear the word gravida, it means pregnancy. It means women pregnancy.
It's ugly. It's ugly stuff. So they may have symptoms of ADHD, but you can't treat them for ADHD. Increased risk for rage disorder, greater incidence of SIDS. I told you about my son having a problem with one of the students. He was kicking the kid, and he was tapping the bottom of his foot. And he was telling the kid to get up and to pull his pants up because his pants were down below his butt. The kid went off on him, and he called him all kinds of fun. He's a mother funner. Anyway, my poor son. Anyway, so and he threatened him. He didn't threaten him once, he threatened him 6 times. He threatened to kill him. He wasn't going to kill him. His dad was going to kill him. His mom was going to kill him. His boys were going to kill him. He was going to get, the whole black student body to kill him. All of this stuff. So you really can't threaten a teacher like that. You can't threaten to kill them. Normally something happens to you. But the kid has rage disorder. And he has poor impulse control. And that's in his IPD. And because of that, they didn't do anything about it, despite the fact he's just threatening his kid. Now, the interesting thing of my son, so the interesting thing may be that now that we've had that shooting in just north of Fort Lauderdale, maybe they will actually crack down on these things. We'll see. I don't know. It's really kind of interesting. Or not. I would like to get my son out of Florida. But he's working on a master's degree in mathematics, so I don't know what's going to happen next. Disability rates of these individuals range from around at 33%. One out of every 3 crack babies. Did I tell you the story about the crack baby that I ran into? This is the first crack baby in Oklahoma City. The mother was a stripper, and she was using crack. Of course, men were giving it to her. And of course, they use it as an aphrodisiac, okay? Anyway, so I had a student, I was teaching junior high at the time, and I had a student that was it was the first crack baby in Oklahoma City. I know, isn't that wonderful? I got the first crack baby in Oklahoma City. This kid was so bad that we couldn't let him be in the normal student population. So we had to isolate him in every class. The way I did it, we put a screen around him. Now, if he was by himself, he didn't disrupt all the other kids. That was the whole idea. So I gave him National Geographic story. And he did things like he would make a pop gun. You can do that out of paper, so that you snap this thing, it sounds like a gunshot. Anyway, he would do that behind the screen. He's shooting kids out, sneaking, peeking around, shooting kids. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. He was a 6th grader. Well, as it turned out, and he said that I was his favorite teacher. I was his favorite teacher. So one day at lunch, he came to my classroom block, knocked on the door. I unlocked the door. I saw him, and I unlocked the door. There was a glass window, one of those small glass panels. I opened the door, and he immediately stuck a gun in my chest and pulled the trigger. It was a .25 caliber automatic. It had a clip of nine shots. Everybody hated this kid because he was just whacked out. I mean, he was nuts. He's always picking up kids and stuff. So in order for him to gain popularity in the school, he brought his brother's pistol to school.
And, he'd say, hey, look at this, and then he'd show him this. He'd go, do you want a bullet? And he would, eject he'd eject it, and he'd pull a bullet out and give it to him. Then he'd jam it back up there, and he'd cock it anyway. Yeah, okay, so he gave away all but 3 of the bullets. So there were 6 bullets somewhere. But there were 3 bullets in the gun he pulled the trigger. But he had jammed it up there so many times that it was the chamber was crooked. He had made the chamber, or he made the bullet crooked with the chamber. So the last time he shoved the clip back in the gun, he had jammed the gun, and he tried to cock it. But he came to my classroom and said, you're my favorite teacher, put the gun right there in my chest. He pulled the gun away, and of course I'm shocked. He pulled the gun away, cocked it really fast, and pulled back the hammer and put it back into my chest. And about that time, the basketball coach, the varsity basketball coach, was walking past, saw what was going on, grabbed the gun, stuck his thumb in between between the hammer and the gun, and yanked it away from him. Broke the kid's finger. Could have been dead. Could have been dead. I was that far away. But I was his favorite teacher. He had a smile on his face the whole time he's trying to kill me. As odd as that seems. Crackling. So I met his mother. She was so attractive. She was so pretty. She was just drop dead gorgeous. Wow. I was ready to start using drugs myself. She was just, she's a stripper. Anyway, I didn't. I stayed married to my wife. They kicked the kid out of school for a year because he had brought a gun to school. They didn't charge him with anything because, they couldn't charge him with anything because he got impulse problems. Anyway, I'm still alive. He's, who knows where he is now. He's probably in jail. Anyway, amphetamines produce mild, intense euphoria, alertness, sexual feelings, and this is the aphrodisiac I was talking about. Remember, I was telling you about my wife and bragging about having sex on that one. That is because she was using her own product. She was using speed. She was using amphetamines. So it gives you sexual feelings. Of course, if you use too much of it, now you've lost that. You've lost those sexual feelings. But this is the reason that they use it as an aphrodisiac in the gay community. Because not only that, but it allows you to have sex. If your sexual parts get raw, you don't feel it until the next day, of course. First time you take a shower, you're going, oh my God, what the hell's going on? Anyway, it gives you sexual feelings and it allows you to, it anesthetizes you to some extent. It gives you a sense of well-being and confidence. After prolonged use, you become irritable, paranoid, your increased anxiety, you become overly aggressive. And part of it has to do with the fact that you've been using this drug. It makes you mentally confused. You use poor judgment. With the more use you have, impaired memory, and of course, eventually hallucinations. Since amphetamines cause an abundance of neurotransmitters that mimic sexual gratification, using the drug becomes a substitute for sexual activity. You think it's sexual desire, but it's not. It's not sexual desire. It's desire for sexual activity. So it's not really a desire to make love, as it were. It's just a desire to perform sex acts. And this is one of the reasons why I was talking about 50 Shades of Grey or whatever that stupid movie is. This guy's got the torture room and he takes his women into the torture room. This guy's probably, in reality, if there were actually somebody in the torture room, he would probably be using this stuff. He doesn't really get sexual gratification from all of this masochism and sadism that he's going through. It's just going through the acts because he feels like he needs to do it. And for that reason, the individuals that use amphetamines to an extended,
extreme extent, these individuals don't understand, no longer understand normal sexual gratification. Amphetamines, and so they will torture other individuals for sexual gratification. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah.
too loud.
No, you're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Edison. You probably saved my job. So I have to give you half my paycheck, right? Is that the way it is? Okay. Amphetamines will also produce violence in people prone to violence because the drug causes people to be suspicious, to be paranoid, and to be overconfident. So these guys are stupid criminals. They are overconfident, so they do all kinds of stupid stuff. But they're suspicious of everybody else. They tend to be paranoid. So they're really bad criminals. And this is one of the reasons why we keep catching these cartels. These individuals are using their own product, and of course they're using it to an extreme extent, and therefore a lot of negative things are happening to these guys. This proclivity for violence among meth users can lead to child abuse and neglect, of course. In Oregon in 2004, 1,850 meth labs were busted, and a full 80% of child abuse and neglect cases involved meth users. So remember, these individuals don't understand affection anymore. They don't understand normal sexual gratification. Well, you can imagine what's going on with their children. These feelings you have for your children, this affection that you have for your children, doesn't exist in them anymore. They don't understand affection. So they have the children, they know they have to take care of the children, so they become violent with the children, and they tend to abuse them. And that's one of the reasons, of course, this is also the reason why they are willing to sell their children for sex. They're willing to sell their children for sex because they don't have the normal affection. We would never do anything like that. That's the furthest thing from our minds. But if you're on this drug, you lose that connection you have with people. You don't have normal feelings of affection anymore. Really kind of tragic. And of course, this is talking about Oregon in 2004. Excessive amphetamine usage can lead to amphetamine psychosis, just as with cocaine, hallucinations, loss of contact with reality, speech patterns that are indistinguishable from paranoid schizophrenia. In other words, you sound like you're schizophrenic. It's making you psychotic. Since these symptoms are caused by excess dopamine released by the drug, psychotic episodes can be induced at fairly low doses in individuals prone to excess dopamine. Some individuals may have immediate psychosis, while others may use for years with no problem. But just because you're able to use this stuff doesn't mean that everybody can use this stuff. It's the same way with marijuana. The people that got marijuana legalized are individuals that don't have a problem with marijuana, but there are individuals that can't use it. I told you about my brother who can't drink Mountain Dew. I had a Mountain Dew before he came to upstairs to talk today. And I'm still here. I'm not up in Maine someplace, wandering around going, where am I? What's going on? But my brother can't use it. He's hypersensitive to caffeine. I'm not. So should I write a law that everybody should use caffeine? Most people that have guns are not going to shoot anybody. Most of them. They're not going to go berserk and try to blow away Las Vegas. But we've got these select individuals, the guy just north of San Antonio, the guy in Las Vegas, this 19-year-old kid in just north of Fort Lauderdale. They can't handle that stuff. So should we write laws for them, or should we write laws for me because I don't feel like shooting anybody? So who should we be writing the laws for? That's the question that we have to ask. And right now we're writing the laws so that Johnny can have his AK-47 and his AR-15 and his bazooka and whatever else he's got at his house, and his 20,000 rounds of ammunition, just in case. He doesn't really have that, does he? Is he going to come to my house and shoot my guns? Okay, thanks.
Actually, I don't know.
Oh, really? Am I in trouble?
No,
Edison told me about all this stuff, so it's his fault. Okay, if you're going to shoot somebody, okay. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to keep myself alive. All right. Paranoid schizophrenia. Okay. Crystal meth seems to have the strongest effect on the brain chemistry, and since it has fewer cardiovascular effects, can be smoked in larger quantities. The result is more severe paranoia, hallucinations, hypervigilant thinking, suicidal depression, and addictive use. I have never had anybody in my emergency room from methamphetamines. It was all from crystal meth. Crystal meth, you can use, it's stronger and you can use it for a longer period of time. And these are the individuals that tend to have the really negative reactions. ADHD is caused by a depletion of dopamine. Amphetamines are used to treat ADHD because they increase dopamine and block its metabolism. Methylphenidate or Ritalin, about 10 million prescriptions per year. Adderall, 7.7 prescriptions per year. Strattera, 5.8 million prescriptions per year. And then there's a new one called Psyalert, and we're not exactly sure how many of these people are out there. Amphetamines work on ADHD about 75% of the time, which means about 75% of the children have actual ADHD. The rest of them have something else. And we're trying to treat them with amphetamines, and it's not working because they don't have the same problems. It may be situational ADHD. It may be something else. And the amphetamines don't work. Research shows that children taking amphetamine therapy for ADHD in the long term have an increased risk of alcohol and drug abuse as adults. Half of children with ADHD have comorbid ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, violence. Okay. If left untreated, these individuals are more likely to progress to more serious problems such as stealing, vandalism, and arson. And the thing that we're most afraid of is arson. Arson means, okay, if an individual has, what time is it? How am I doing? Okay, I got lots of time. Okay. Arson is means that they don't care about other people. So if we have somebody that has antisocial personality disorder, they will have three problems. One of the problems is bedwetting, as odd as that sounds. One of the problems is torturing small animals. They don't, I know. And when you see a little puppy, you go, oh, it's so cute, oh, that puppy, or the kitten, oh, it's so cute, you know, or a dog or something, you know. That's the way we feel. But somebody with antisocial personality disorder will take that puppy or that kitten and it will torture it. It will kill it. It will do horrible things to that animal. So that's one of the legs of antisocial personality disorder. The third one is arson, is they like to see fire. Fire is uncontrollable. You know, you start a fire in the wastebasket, all of a sudden the whole room bursts into flames, and all four of us are dead. You know, that's arson. And these people have this desire to destroy, and it's proven through this arson. So if arson is one of the side effects of whatever you're doing, that's one leg of the whole antisocial personality mindset. And if they don't appreciate children or babies, you can imagine if you have a child that is torturing puppies and kittens, what's going to happen when it has a baby of its own? If we have children, we want to take care of them. We want to protect them. And it's because we understand that they're young and vulnerable. But here is an individual that tortures vulnerable things. Okay. So that's antisocial personality disorder. And that's why this is so serious. Just the arson is so serious. We need to understand what else is going on with this kid. We need to find out how they feel about puppies and kittens and whether they torture things. Torture other kids. Are they bullies at school? They try to injure the vulnerable. One of the main uses for amphetamines throughout the 20th century was as a diet pill, but every time a new drug hit the market, it seemed to cause its own set of problems. One such problem came with the two amphetamines, phentermine and fenfluramine, marketed as fen-phen. You took two drugs. My wife did this. She was always having problems maintaining her weight,
She's a short, squat individual. She wanted to be in the military. The military is for tall, slender people, so their weight control program has to do with tall, slender people. Well, she's short. She's got arms that are this long. She's short and squat. She's got the little tiny arms. Really kind of interesting. So she fought with her weight the entire time she was in the service. Well, she started using Fen-Phen in order to lose weight, and it worked. She lost weight. She lost enough weight that she was fine. She was no longer under the observations of the weight control people. Given in tandem, the drug caused heart valve damage in select women. Not in all women, but in select women. They've taken the stuff off the market. It's no longer on the market. 1999, it left the market. It was on the market for about 5 years. One of the individuals that pushed this stuff was Oprah, because she used it and she was able to lose weight. You know, Oprah has the same yo-yo cycle of weight loss that a lot of other people have. And so she's the one that pushed it, and it took them a long time to get it off the market because Oprah's the one that pushed it. And of course, she has a lot of power. She's one of the richest women in the world, literally in the world. Queen Elizabeth has more money. Other stimulants have been used all over the world for centuries. Khat in the Middle East, betel nuts in the Far East, yohimbe in Africa, and ephedra in the Mediterranean region. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time. This has been a really fun class.